Well, just to illustrate the tools that I used and the relative simplicity of the most complicated part of these engines, let's go from left to right. I used a hammer, needle nose pliers, the small Carlisle 3451 pliers, the small Napa punch, part number 955, 1/8" drive, just to get that started. Big pick, small pick, large flat blades, number 1 Phillips, and then a small, like, 0.25 Phillips or whatever it is. I think this is 5/16 socket. Yep, 5/16, quarter inch, quarter inch drive, 3-inch extension, 5/32 hex bit, quarter inch or 1/8 inch hex bit, ratchet, quarter drive, 1 inch, and then I think this is 9/16. Yep, 9/16 half-inch drive socket. Both of those are half, or should be half drive. That one's a 3/8, but a couple of 3/8 drive. So 5/16 and a quarter hex socket, 1/2 inch deep well, and then an adapter, since again I'm too cheap. 3/8, half, 9/16 I remember using. There was a couple other things like this nose cone that needed a bigger socket. And then like a pair of channel locking pliers would be helpful. Small impact, big impact, WD-40 or PB Blaster, your choice. Brake clean. Some caffeinated tea this late at night, not a good idea. You know what they say, if you love something so much you shouldn't drink it. I don't know whether there's any truth to that, but I stopped drinking coffee because I loved it so much it ate holes in my stomach. I love coffee. Yeah, some wrenches or something from over here. Maybe some borax if you're feeling unclean and sinful. Maybe calipers if you want to measure the size of your chode. That's on you though. Anyhow, hopefully this was mildly unhelpful, and you probably could have figured this out yourself. But yeah, there's little things like removing that governor assembly that I'm really glad that I looked online and caught that, because I would have fucked up something with that pump body and pulling it out. And again, there's got to be a way to press this apart, but if I find something, I'll let you know. Okay, so what we have here is a Roosa-Master or Stanadyne design injection pump. This is the DB2 model, so that means it's a 2 plunger. And this came off of an old 7.3 liter indirect injected international diesel. So as you can see here, I have already begun disassembling the front cone of this. I started this probably 6 months ago, so I don't exactly remember how this goes together. But the first part of this is, you see these 2 slats here. This is your fuel inlet. So the first thing you want to do is grab a hold of these 2 slats, I believe with a 7/8 or 3/4, and then this is a 3/4 inch socket, and you want to take this guy loose. There's an O-ring on it, as well as I think there's an O-ring on this brass elbow, or this brass L fitting that goes in, so you want to take that out. And then once you have that screen, or this inlet adapter out, you'll want to take loose this little hex key retaining screw and collet, or whatever that is, that engages with these splines, and then you'll use that same wrench that you used to hold this cone to screw this off the front. As you can see, this nose cone screws into the front of the injection pump. So you want to take that guy out, and for my curiosity, I pulled this filter screen apart, which I believe is retained by an O-ring on top of this guy. So I think this sets in there like this, inside of the pump, and this fits on the top there, and this O-ring secures it in place. So I pulled that O-ring, and as you can see, it's split, and that allowed me to pull this filter screen. So I might end up, I've got another spare pump over there, I might end up just using the filter screen out of it. Once you have that out, as you can see, there are 2 very tiny springs, of which I only have one because I lost the other one. Focus. And these hold in the vanes for the transfer pump, which engages with these. And as you can see, these are just slightly offset. So 2 will go in like this with the slots down, and then 2 will go in like this of the slots up, so that way the springs can pass through and it can push the slats against the inside of this low bait. And let me flip it around. Low bait cam ring. So this cam ring will force those plungers in and out, and that acts much like a power steering pump in that it creates a pressure side and suction side. So pull that ring out and then very gingerly pull all of these vanes out. For this job, you'll definitely want like a little impact gun like this, corner drive ratchet as well. And then I've got a magnet that I use to pull stuff out. I found that they help quite a bit. The next thing that you want to do is take a 5/16 socket, and I have an extension like this. And then you want to undo those bolts and pull this top cover off. Note the position of this fuel shutoff solenoid armature here. When it goes on, it should be forward like this, and you should have to press the top back. That means that the fuel shutoff solenoid is in front of the fuel shutoff and the rack in there, and that will allow it to push against this rack and to shut fuel off. Now if you get it on the other side of the rack, which would be admittedly very hard to do, it will push the rack all the way forward and you'll have full fuel. So I wouldn't advise that. I mean, if you want to blow your engine up, you're more than welcome to. I can't tell you what to do, but that's where I'd start. All right, so this is the fuel shutoff solenoid cap. So the first thing that I did was, this is a 9/16 and this is a 5/8. So I took this elbow fitting loose first, and then I'm gonna put that in here. And then I use my impact gun with 5/8 to take this plug loose. I believe that there's a filter screen or something in there. Maybe it's a one-way valve that only lets fuel out. I think that's the return side of the pump. Anyhow, yeah, I think that's the return side. So that's the fuel return solenoid. Yeah, I'm just going to go in there, clean it up, and make sure that everything looks good in there. If you want, now would be an opportune time to pull your fuel shutoff solenoid as well, although you can test these in the body. They don't generally go bad, and if they do, this symptoms are just no start. It'll start off at ether, but you just won't have any feel at the injectors, and if it just started doing that and it's been running, then generally it's the fuel shutoff solenoid if you don't hear it clicking. And you can supply battery power to this lug right here, because this is the ground side. This is the negative. You can supply power here, and that'll actuate the solenoid. If you don't hear it clicking, it's a pretty loud, pretty audible solenoid click, then you'll know that your shutoff solenoid's bad. Also, if it has infinite resistance. I don't remember what the resistance value is actually supposed to be, but definitely not infinite. So the next thing that I'm going to do, I think, is work on taking this throttle linkage out of the pump here, although I'm going to look around the pump first and see if there's anything else that I need. So what I've done here is remove this triangular block-off plate. As this pump sits in the engine of the truck, this is looking rearward. So you're going to be looking on this side of the body of the pump, because over here is your wide open throttle something. I don't remember what it's called. At least I think that's what it is. But right in here, I might need to get a light, I think is what most folks call the fuel screw. So, oh, I got some bark. I was working in the woods the last 2 weeks. Yeah, I believe down in there, there's a little Allen head down in that hole. Might be able to see the 6 flats of it. That little Allen head, if you turn it up 1 flat, will produce a bit more black smoke, and if you turn it up 2 flat, it'll give it a little bit more oomph. The naturally aspirated diesels don't have a particularly large quantity of torque or horsepower, especially horsepower, but they're fun. But anyhow, if you turn that up 2 flat, then you get a lot of smoke. Canadian gentleman who's known for doing that. Anyhow, yeah, I think the next step is going to be this. I don't know that there's anything else that can be pulled out of the front of this pump. All right, so the next thing that I did was took a pair of needle nose pliers that I got out of my granddad's tool set when he passed away. Anyhow, I pulled this little retaining spring, or retaining ring out rather. It's a spring ring or a spring something. I don't know what the technical term is. Then I'm going to fish these two who's and watchets out of here if I can get them out. And there's one on each side. You can see that ring and then that ring. Not sure if they'll come out without removing these injection line adapters. So I got this little impact gun as a combo deal with the larger 1/2-inch drive impact. And that Craftsman impact sucks dick, so I leave it in my truck. But this little gun is worth its weight in gold. This anvil thing falls out a lot. But what I've been doing is using this 1/2-inch deep well socket to remove these injector adapters. As you can see, it's a fine thread to a medium thread. I don't know, like a 7/16 medium thread, 7/16 by 18 or 16 or whatever the rating is. So we're going to put these over here. And then, oh yeah, internal parts go in there. So each of these cam rings come out like that. And then here's another one. And there are witness marks that face a certain direction, and that was upward. So we were looking at it earlier. I'm going to put that like that. This is the gasket for this part of the pump. Next thing, go ahead and pull this anti-taper pin out. Yeah, people always bitch and moan whenever these, the IDIs or any other tractors won't start when it's cold, and they'll be like, oh, you need new glow plugs, oh, you got low compression. But another thing that I found is if you have a weak injection pump, i.e. the plungers inside of the pump here are worn and they can't produce the pressure, and the pump's worn out and it's not timed correctly, then these trucks won't start for shit when it's cold. So it really is key to have a properly timed and calibrated pump, be it mechanical or one of the newer, like CP3 driven or CP4, the modern iteration driven common rail diesels. You got to have injectors that are calibrated to the specs of the engine, and they've got to learn the feeling rates, etc. But that's not my area of expertise. But it's very applicable here in the mechanical sense that if you don't have a good operating pump, then your truck's not going to start very well. It might have smoking issues. It might lack power. So this is where I advise a lot of folks to look if, say they're having hard starting issues and the glow plug circuitry seems to be fine. The glow plug relay isn't clicking on and off. All the glow plugs have good resistance and the wiring's been redone and you got new injection nozzles in it and the compression is all even within 15% of each other, above 300 PSI, then really the only thing that it could be is, clogged fuel system, gummed up fuel system, or the injection pump is bad, as long as the air filter is, intact and not plugged. Next thing we're going to do is pull this little O-ring, set that right there, and then pull this bigger O-ring. Again, like I'm saying, having picks and small little tools is pretty key to doing this. It's like watchmaking, it's a very fine, very precisely calibrated piece of machinery. And as you can see inside of there, there's little orifices coming from the internal plumbing that provide fuel to the injection lines. All right, so next thing's next. Soak this sucker down in some WD-40. And then as you can see here, I have already removed the E-clip. And what I do with these is, since this shaft was able to rotate in its bore, you can see it twisting over here, I faced it downward, so the bottom part of this E-clip was facing down, so when I pushed it in there, when it let go, it wouldn't fly off. So we'll put that guy over here just temporarily, and then we will attempt to drive this shaft out. There it goes. Kind of work it out like that. I don't believe this goes to any internal fuel passages, so we should be good there. And I'm going to pull this lever off. It has something to do with wide open throttle, i.e. when the throttle is wide open, you can see it bumps up on this cam here and actuates a plunger inside of the base of the pump here. Okay, so the next thing I did was grabbed a 1-inch socket, put it in my gun with a 3/8 adapter since I'm cheap and won't go buy SAE impact sockets, and removed this plunger. It has an O-ring on it that I will promptly remove. This thing smells like ass inside. It smells like old turpentine. Yeah, no, this pump is probably completely gelled. Here's the little spring that goes inside of it, and we'll also see if there's any other parts that come out with it. I don't believe there are, but we'll spray that out in there and see. And again, this is an internal pump part, so we keep internal parts with internal parts. And here, same size socket, 1 inch, I removed the dummy plug from that side of the transmission. So we'll put that, or transmission, injection pump. Next thing that we're going to do is remove this bottom hex key socket, and I don't know about this guy. I don't know what that does, but we'll remove this one. I want to see what's in there. Using a 1/4 inch drive 3/8 socket adapted to my gun, I also removed this, and shall promptly remove this pinko ring. I'm going to note that this is the orientation which this plug came out after I moved the aforementioned 1/4 drive hex key from it. This plunger came out, and then you'll notice that this barrel slides in and out, and that it came out with this side, i.e. with the flat up. The 3 orifices are facing towards the outlet side of the pump. The single orifice is facing this way. I don't think it would go in anyways the other way, because that plug wouldn't allow it to move in and out of its bore, i.e. this plug would hit if this flat weren't cut into it, into the barrel of this piston or whatever this is, slide valve. Very technical sort of thing, isn't it? Okay, and I don't think that went all the way through. It wouldn't make sense for it to. No, because then it would shear off the pump. So that obviously has to stop before it can get all the way down in there. And I'm just going to double check that. Yep. So this slides in up to a certain point in there and then stops. Okay. The next thing that I've done is remove these 2 unique shouldered little cap screws from the front of the pump. It's right here and right here. This one corresponds to this side, and it will go right there. And then this one corresponds to this side, and it will go right there. I've fixtured this pump in the vise using the previously removed wide open throttle plunger nut things body in there, i.e. the flat spaces, as the fixturing surface with a rag, of course, because I don't want to mar them. And then I'm stabilizing it with the front mounting flange of the pump. It always amazed me that this little mounting flange can take all the weight and motion and, you know, not break or crack. I'm sure they do. The next thing I did too was wet all this down, or spray it down rather, because, you know, WD-40 is not wet, it's a water displacer, but whatever. I sprayed it down with WD-40 as a lubricant or a penetrant. I could have also used PB Blaster, but WD-40 was handy. Next thing that I'm going to do is grab a mallet and my roll pin punch set. I'll show you the Napa part number for that. Napa hand tools, part number 305. I think this is a Carlisle part number. And come over and grab the plastic hammer. It's one of my favorite hammers in the shop. I should show you all the chode hammer before I forget. This thing is absolutely epic. It's like 1.5 pounds of pure anger. I should keep this in my truck as the, you know, defense weapon. It's so short. It reminds me of my dick. Anyhow, enough of that. So the next thing that we'll want to do is find the smallest roll pin punch that we can, which I believe is this guy, and begin driving it. And as you can see, I've positioned, there's a range that the throttle can be positioned in. I've positioned it here so that way I can get the best shot at driving this sucker out. I'm going to drive this way and then hopefully not mushroom the top out so I have to grind it or sand it down. And then once that's done, I'll flip it back this way and I will, if I can, get an E-Torx or a Torx bit in there, and if not, I will round it off with a pair of vice grips, and I'll pull this cam off, and then release this spring, and be able to pull this throttle linkage through the body of the injection pump. Something I suppose I didn't realize, but this cam ring floats free on this shaft. So before you pull this out, and by the way, I did end up getting a pair of vice grips because none of my fucking sockets would fit. I mean, Jesus fuck. How hard does it have to be to make just like one of those, you know, folding hex key things, Craftsman? Anyways, yeah, make sure that you index this to wherever it's supposed to go. I mean, I suppose you could also set this up once the pump is all back together, and then just leave this loose, put the thing in it, and then at wide open throttle, set it to where this cam ring is fully actuating the thing, but only just. So as you can see up under here, there's a definite wear pattern, so just follow that wear pattern. If the pump hasn't ever been apart before and it seems to be operating correctly, and isn't binding up, then I'd say do that. Otherwise, you can reclock it so that way at wide open throttle, or whenever the truck's at idle, rather, the truck will be at idle right now. That lever will be off of the cam, and then as soon as you go to wide open throttle, it'll walk up that cam and actuate, push that piston inward. Please do note that in order to remove this cam ring, that you have to remove the bolt completely, and also that there's a little steel washer behind this cam ring. I'm going to set those over there like that. But as you'll notice, there's a slot or a groove in there, and that bolt will hit up against this flange, and you won't be able to pull it off without removing the bolt. So the next thing that I'm doing, as you can tell, it's a torrential rainstorm outside. But anyhow, the next thing is take this bolt out of the bottom of the pump towards the back. That required a 5/16 Allen head again without adapter since I'm too cheap. I remove that, and then I believe this front section of the pump comes out of the body. And I think that has to happen before I can take the rack assembly out, because this holds the back end of the rack, or the back end of the piston assembly and throttle up top. And I think I need to take this bigger one out. I wouldn't really fuck with this bottom one because that's the fine adjustment, and I did. And so I'm gonna have to go back through and turn it in and turn it out until the engine smooths out. I should have taken a picture or noted where the threads were, so I'll have to look back through my video. God bless, it's raining. Good thing I mowed 2 hours ago. Using a 5/32 hex bit, I removed this plug from the inside of the shaft, and as you can see, out came with it a spring and a plunger. Set those right there. Still not sure how I'm going to get this sucker apart. I remember that these load from the front. This case is solid from the back and everything is stacked in from the front. I just don't remember if I have to pull anything else out before I beat the front of this pump out. Okay, so I did end up removing this, looks like a pin, and it looks like it guides the motion of this rack assembly in here. So I loosened off the jam nut that this threads into. It threads through the jam nut and actually into the threads in the housing here, so make sure you don't get it cross-threaded in either of those when you put it back in. This is a 1/2 and this is a 3/8 on this particular pump. I don't know what that is on the other ones. Yeah, and really anything that I don't need to take apart, that I don't need to screw with the adjustment, I'm not gonna. Like, I've seen it mentioned in the literature that you don't want to mess with this screw, the setting of the screw on this wide open throttle lever, or whatever it's called, just because you won't be able to calibrate it. I mean, unless you want to pay, you know, however much money for a calibration machine, which I don't even know if you can still get those, so. All right, so I guess you got a wrench on it pretty hard to get this spring out of its little land and groove thing in here. I just used a screwdriver. Careful you don't mar up the housing. You don't want a bunch of aluminum bits in there. I don't know what's next, because this throttle shaft seemed to be binding on this guy here. So I don't know whether or not I need to remove this and then how I'm going to do that. Very odd. Okay, while it seems impossible, this thing comes out of the pump. So the way that I did it was like, move the throttle like that, cant the spring tip, you can see I bent it slightly doing that, but I canted it off to one side of this plate right here. And then I tilted it forward, popped it up, and then used the leverage that this provided to pop it up and over this cap. And then from there, wiggle the throttle back and forth until this sucker pops off. And it goes like that. It's guide block. Guide block, I think is what it was called. Yeah. Anyhow, let's go over here. This part. That one will be pretty obvious the way that it goes. And then this throttle assembly should pull out. Yeah. There's an O-ring on the shaft right there, and there's probably going to be an O-ring over here in this one. Maybe not. Might just be that little metal ring. And then note that this spring sits in this housing like this, and it goes into that block, and then this sits against its groove, and then tension holds this end down here. Okay, so I pulled out the first part of the governor assembly, or maybe this would be more aptly described as like an armature or a linkage. And the way that I did it was I slid this hole up and off of that stud. So, right, there's one hole for the spring, and then the larger hole is for that unoccupied stud right here under my finger. And then I pulled it up, because you'll notice there are two tangs here, and those hook underneath of the weight basket to control engine speed. You'll notice there's a cam side on that as well. Anyhow, those tangs have to be off of that cam surface, so you have to leverage up like this and then twist this way and pull out like this. And I swung this governor armature up like so when I was doing it, and then leveraged out like that. But don't go yanking on anything too hard. These are, small parts. Again, something about a Swiss watch. And I think this guy, yeah, this one also comes out. So note too that this goes in there like this, and it has a range of motion like that. And there might be a little screw down in there. I can't tell. I really hope there isn't, because anyhow. Okay, so this required, oh shit, I just had it. There we go. 1/8 inch bit, and then I jimmy rigged 1/4 inch on the end of this extension. And then back here behind this like pivot part of the governor assembly, the governor armature was this thing, which I think is some sort of vent. I don't know. It looks like it's got some blue Loctite on it though, so be sure to put that back in. Yeah, I just don't want anything left in the top here that looks like it passes from the body of the injection pump into the head. Or into the head here. Because, like, if I try to drive this sucker out, I really don't want to bung something up, you know, really muck up a hole and to not be able to use the pump body. But I guess I've never taken one apart before, so live and you learn. Live and you learn. So I suppose this is much like disassembling an automatic transmission that loads from the front, except in my case what I did was I took a hammer and I tapped against the back of the shaft, figuring that the force would transfer through the front. You can see an engagement spline there. And indeed, it took a bit of effort because this O-ring was seized in there. But yeah, I was able to knock the head out. So this part of the head comes out first. I'm not sure if I'll be able to take this apart or what I would take out in there. I don't know, it looks like there's a screw, maybe 2, maybe 3. And then maybe this part disassembles or something comes out of it. And then this guy in the bottom, there's a cam ring here, which you can see has 8 lobes on it and a good deal of wear. means it's an 8-cylinder. And as you can see too, the whatever you call this, thrust washer, this plastic thrust washer is just toast. There's a direction mark, and this direction mark in my case goes down, and I think that denotes the rotation of the pump. There's a rotation mark on the top, along with the part number next to it. The bottom doesn't have a part number. Go ahead and put that right here. It's for safekeeping along with this. Note that there's a big O-ring on the side of it, which will take off promptly. And I think these are the 2 plungers. Like the name implies, it is a 2-plunger pump. So this is the one side of the pump, and note that it has this guide right here that is faced in this direction, and also that this guide over here, this plunger, is faced in this direction. I might also consider taking out this retainer ring. And then removing that snap ring to pull this weight basket off the bottom to see if I can replace that thrust washer. Alright, so what I just did was I used that 5/32 or whatever size it was bit to remove this guy. The numbers were facing upside down, just like so, on this guy. And then used a pair of snap ring pliers, this pair. Carlisle 3451 to remove this snap ring from the bottom side, and this is the side of this retainer that weight basket came off of, or that snap ring came off of. It came off the bottom of this. Then I beat this guy, this shaft, against the table, and this valve or whatever check valve fell out. Again, all these little tiny pieces of thrust washer. I'll keep that together so we remember to get one of those. Then you can pull this out of the weight basket and just note its position in the weight basket. Yeah, this is a chunk of plastic. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but it would be nice if they made these out of metal still. The other thing that I wanted to mention is right in here, you probably can't see it very well, but there's a snap ring. So we're going to have to go in there, a pair of snap ring pliers, and pull that snap ring out. And I'll show you that when it's all apart in a minute. So here's the snap ring and the wave washer behind it, or the spring washer, whatever you want to call it. God damn this stupid fucking extension cord. Fuck. Okay, and then you should be able to pull out injection pump, and note there's some lip seals on here, and there might be an O-ring or something that seals it's against it. And there's also, oh, you're seeing my hand, there's this needle or roller bearing in there. So I'll go ahead and put this off to the side, just like so. I don't know that there's anything else to really take out of this. I think those lip seals really seal the shaft, which is probably a good idea. Then this gets lubed with engine oil, I think is how that works. Because this is sealed from the outside by a big O-ring in the injection pump housing. So this must be lubricated with engine oil. But yeah, because it's behind the camshaft. I wonder if there's a supply of oil in the camshaft that goes to this bearing. Probably somehow splash lubrication, or more likely pressurized. I don't remember. I got a cam sitting around here somewhere. Well, that one's still in the block, and that one's still in the box, so I'm not going to get it out. Yeah, so that's that. I'm not seeing anything down in here that's really alarming. It looks like a pretty normal, albeit worn, pump body. Trying to take that vent thing out of the, or not taking that vent thing out. I was a little worried, a couple of these, that I was going to score the case housing, but I think it's fine. So I guess she's disassembled. At least the pump body is. I'll get back to you if I need to disassemble any of the internal components. But for now, we're gonna stand this sucker up right here. Okay, so I think this is the head. I tried beating on it lightly with a mallet, and I think this sucker ain't gonna come apart. I don't think it really needs to. I did take the 2 valves and springs out of here, just noting their orientation. That sits down in there like that, and the spring on top of it, and the retaining screw. Not quite sure how deep these went, but there's a spot where they bottom out, so I suspicion that's where. And then this little Phillips head plug right here, just because I want to re-RTV everything and get it clean. I'm going to go home and download the Stanadyne Roosa-Master. There's like a 70-page sort of rebuild diagram thing for these. So I'm going to go home, look over that, and then bring my computer when I put this back together. But I think for now that's fine. I also pulled the pumping plungers out of the board. Now these are commonly what gets seized. Let me set this down right here. You'll see that there's a bore in there. And that bore is basically a perfect machine fit. So you'll notice it's like fairly difficult to actually push or pull the plungers out at the moment, and they should just slide in and out. And what'll happen is they'll get turpentine, they'll get gummed up in there, they'll get crud in the fuel. For this reason, it's like an automatic transmission in that it has to be surgically clean when it goes back together. Everything that you see here, my grimy hands, I'm definitely going to clean before I put this thing back together, which I'm not doing tonight. It's probably getting on 8:30, but yeah, I told you about the basket, and it looks like this basket isn't replaceable. Or not the basket, the retainer ring here on the bottom. It looks like I'm gonna have to either cut rivets or whore out some holes. So, not sure about that. Cam ring could probably use replaced. Then this weight basket, I'm gonna take all apart and have a look at all of its internal components. One more thing that I recommend when cleaning a pump and all of its parts like this, for the first clean, the rough clean, as I like to call it, use kerosene. I'm gonna use one of these tubs over here, probably one of the small ones, maybe the big one. I probably won't need it and just get parts lost. And this jug of kerosene right here, I've had for years. The shit works great. It's like diesel fuel. You can use gasoline, use kerosene. Just use gloves when you're doing it. Yeah. I'm just Mr. I'm gonna get cancer and love it, so there's that. But I'll make a list of all the tools we'll need as well. Okay, a couple things to note just before I end this video. You'll want to check the inside of the cam ring for wear. You'll want to look at the rollers and shoes that press against the plungers, as well as the plungers for wear. The thrust washer that separates the governor assembly and weight, or that separates the weight basket from the main shaft of the pump, you want to check for wear. The fuel transfer pump inlet screen, filter screen, is replaceable, and generally they come as sort of a plastic unit in reman pumps. The pump that I went through in this video was probably original to the truck or was installed by the dealer in the 90s or early 2000s. Most of those parts haven't been seen in a long time, so you want to check that. Also, the advanced piston, that's what I found it was called in literature. The advanced piston bore can get wore out because it's made of aluminum. It's an aluminum alloy versus the hardened steel piston itself, which slides in the bottom of the pump there. That big piston with the 2 dummy plugs that I was talking about. Make sure that that piston isn't super scored, and that especially its bore isn't super scored. That can be a problem and can cause fuel leakage, lack of power, and issues with timing advance. If I think of anything else, I'll let you know. Otherwise, cheers.